Hi, and welcome to our podcast. I'm your host, Howard Drukarsh. And for those who don't know me, I've been a successful realtor in Canada's largest market for over 30 years. And in the latter part of my career, I co-founded Right at Home Realty with an agent roster of over 5,600 agents and growing. In 2020, I retired to start this podcast, and it's been a remarkable opportunity to interview and meet highly successful people in real estate and related fields. And today, our guest is one of those people. John Lusink, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Howard. It's truly a pleasure to be a guest on your show, and I'm looking forward to our time together.
Thank you, John. And for full disclosure, I have to admit that John, of all the guests we've had, John's the only one I worked with. And while I was at Right at Home Realty, John took over as president and broker of record. And I'll sing his praises when we get into his bio. So let me talk about John, and then we'll get into the questions. As I mentioned, he's broker of record and president. Like myself, John has had over 30 years experience in the business. He was an award-winning commercial real estate agent. He's managed corporate offices for one of Canada's largest brands. He's owned a major residential franchise. He's been in organized real estate like myself. We were both on the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board at the same time. John has been a commercial director at the Ontario Real Estate Association. And at TREB, he served as chairman of government relations for 2 years and was chair of the finance committee. And John was much more active in organized real estate than I was, but he has what a great career. He also has a great deal of experience in mergers and acquisitions, in operations, building high performance teams, and it's just a delight. His background is an MBA from the University of Fredericton and a BA from Queen's University. So, John, thanks for sending me that great bio. I didn't want to blow any part of it. Okay. So let's, and I said this earlier, I've done 26 episodes, and one of the hardest things you can do as a host is interview a friend, because you have to balance the friend chat with what people are looking for. So we're kind of mix it up a bit today. So let me start with the first question, and it's the one I think makes the most sense. A lot of people are interested in this for you. What was your career prior to real estate?
Well, I'd have to start with something you mentioned in the bio, which was my BA from Queen's, which was in psychology. And so you can imagine that coming out of a university with that degree really didn't lend itself to going in a particular direction. So I ended up in sales, selling probably the earliest versions of what were cellular and paging systems, and was fortunate enough, had a great mentor, general manager, who sent me to the Xerox Professional Selling Skills program, and so that got me started in sales, and so that was pre-real estate.
Mm-hmm. And when you decided on a career in real estate, what was it that motivated you?
Well, here's the second part. I actually didn't really decide on the career. That same general manager joined a company you and I both know today as CBRE. Back in those days, it started out as Coldwell Banker Commercial, and after he'd been gone for 6 months, he gave me a call and said, this is something you might want to consider. And to be very honest, I didn't have the first clue about what went on in the world of commercial real estate. So after a bunch of interviews and checking things out, I actually ended up at Royal LePage Commercial Office Leasing Division as a research consultant. So the career was sort of by chance, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Since we both go back at least 30 years in this business, I'm always fascinated when I have an opportunity to talk to people who are new to the business about what it was like. So, what are your memories of 30 years ago in the real estate business and how it's changed since then?
Well, I'm actually in some ways quite proud to say it was 35 years ago that I got started, and I think my memories were of some great camaraderie, in the commercial real estate business, and I think today it still stands. We were employees. Although it was competitive, we worked and played hard together. But my memories were also that it was tough. Were it not for some excellent training, some excellent mentorship, and quite frankly, persistence, I probably, would have been one of the many casualties that we unfortunately see come through the real estate business.
My understanding of commercial is, and of course anybody who knows it, is it's a business where there's huge wins in terms of the financial gains, but it's a long process between the start and the end. Did you find that in your career as well?
Absolutely. I think a lot of our fellow colleagues who aren't in the commercial business assume that the financial gains are huge. There are as many small commercial deals as there are residential, but on the flip side, yes, I often had transactions that took anywhere from a year to 2 years to close, and sometimes they didn't, and so a lot of there was an awful lot of hanging around, a lot of patience required, and quite frankly, you had to park those and just forge ahead, because pretty easy to get off track. So yeah, it's quite different in terms of the timelines from start to finish, for sure.
And in our industry, there are people that start out in residential, wanting to move to commercial. And there are people that go from commercial back, go the other way into residential. But I think if someone can be well-rounded and handle both, because, oftentimes, and I remember my own career, you would have a residential client and they would say, gee, you did a great job. I'm looking to lease some space, or I have a building to sell. And, if you can handle both sides of it, it just makes you more valuable, right, to your clients.
Yeah, I think so. But there's a bit of a trap there. Of course, we all want to serve our clients well and take care of all of their needs. And going from residential to commercial, or commercial, quite frankly, to residential without the appropriate training and due diligence and whatever else is required can be a recipe for disaster. So if there's one thing that I always used to tell anybody thinking of that, is something that I did very early on in my career, is I took the courses, the CCIM designation courses, and you don't have to take those. There are many other excellent commercial courses, and I would highly recommend that people invest in that, because it's no different than a residential agent who strictly does condos selling a farm. Equally challenging. So that's something that did help me early on in my career, I have to say.
And I'm glad I asked that question, because when I was in the role you had, or managing branches, you would have agents asking you about, can I do this or can I do that? And my answer was the same as yours. You're responsible when you take on a client to know what you're doing. Yes. And it's really important that all agents understand that. And obviously you have a great attitude about how to keep everybody from getting in trouble. So, I'm glad that one came up. One of the things that's changed, you talked about the early days with cell phones, and I remember, you do too, I'm sure, when people's cell phone was a suitcase, and then the suitcase weighs like 40 pounds, right? And then it went from there. But technology, and again, we both remember when, if you wanted to know what a listing was, you had to go to the office, You had to fight for the little books that people were hoarding so that you couldn't get to them.
Right.
So technology has been huge. But in over your career, and as we're kind of moving out of the pandemic and into certainly a somewhat different world, how do you see technology changing the way agents have worked, let's say, in the past year, and what they'll be doing in future years?
Well, that's the $20 million question, of course. But it's interesting. I think back as we were talking about commercial to my HP 12C calculator, where I had to program everything in order to end up figuring out the present value of an investment or cash flow or what have you. And of course today, that isn't necessary. You can do it all at the click of a mouse quite simply. So, I mean, the pros and cons. There's so many excellent programs available now, and so much great technology, that part of the challenge has become sifting through all of that for agents to figure out what's going to fit their business and their business approach and style. And so I think, as much as technology has definitely made life easier, it's still, you still have to make it work. You still have to work with it, and you still have to figure out what actually is going to fit the kind of business you're building. So, but going forward, I think it's only going to improve. If anything good has come out of this pandemic, not that there is anything, but if it's forced us to do anything, and that is to work even faster and harder on what technology means to a company and to an individual agent, and how we're going to apply that going forward. So it's kind of put our technology strategy on turbo boost, if you will.
And again, I look back on the years when technology came in, whether it was cell phones, pagers first, cell phones, and I always felt that success with a client was based on whatever way they wanted you to communicate with them. If they wanted you to use the phone, use the phone.
Right.
If they want you to text, use text. If there's new technology that they want you to use, you've got to be up to date, because that's the way they want to work. And a lot of times what happens is, and you brought it up, it's moving so fast. A lot of salespeople, don't know how to keep up with it, because the client leads the way, essentially. And I think that's always been the way it has been in this business.
That's a great point. And, something that also has become clear as a result of being forced into isolation is that, clients crave human interaction, as do realtors, as do managers, as does the public in general, and Zoom and texting and Skype and all those other means of communicating only take you so far. People still crave that human to human interaction. And so, while all of those tools are great and helpful, I think if there's one thing that I would stress today that's even more important is communicating directly and purposefully with the customer, the end customer. And as you say quite correctly, they will ultimately determine how they want to be interacted with. But I can tell you that whether it's from employees or whether it's from salespeople, it's become clear that all this virtual stuff is all fantastic, but at the end of the day, what really is what they really want to get back to is person to person.
And this also is a technology question, because I remember I used to tell people, this goes back to 2004, around the early days of this company, that technology is going to change like every 5 years. Can you believe that? Every 5 years. I got a feeling it's now changing every 12 months, right? It's just so much. Really unfair question, but how do you, if you were to kind of guess in 5 years how this industry might change, do you have any vision of what it might be?
One thing that's become very clear is that most brokerages, and you know this from all your years in the industry, have been promoting the fact that they have the best leading technology that exists. And I think what's become clear is that that isn't the case, and that there are so many new entrants into the industry that have figured out new and novel ways to interact with the customer, and also to create a connection between the customer and the agent in some cases. And so for us going forward in terms of our short, medium, long-term strategy, really it's about building the kind of technology that's going to help our agents boost their business, but at the end of the day, it's ultimately about providing a much better experience for the customer. And so if we can help the agent provide that to the customer, then I think everybody wins. So longer term, it's also about figuring out how to connect all the various technologies out there. And you probably recall that, as an agent, you're probably logging into 8 to 10 to 15 different sites for different pieces of information as you're working with a customer. And so, we're focused on finding a way to make that a much more seamless, simple process for our agents, and that's what we're building as we speak. And so I think going forward, that's a huge piece, is the agent-facing technology. But then, of course, there's the technology required to run our business, and then there's figuring out how do we interact with all the other entities that are out there, whether it's MLS boards, associations, compliance, the regulator. So finding a way to pull that all together is really what it's about. And so that's our big challenge going forward.
And on this topic of technology, as you know, there's been a lot of concerns that agents have that technology will eliminate the need for a real estate agent. Now, we both have so many years in the business, we know that's not the case. But what do you say to someone who's got a fear that somehow technology will take out the most important part of a transaction, which is the human part?
Right. I personally, in my lifetime, don't believe we will see that happen. There are certainly, technology companies that are have tried to build the kind of business that is a direct consumer, to tech, relationship without needing an agent. Quite frankly, I don't see that happening. I see the agent as being even more valuable, because someone still has to interpret the data. Someone still has to help walk that client through the ever-increasing volume of paperwork and regulations and legal issues. So until someone can actually figure out how to manage all that without a live person, I quite frankly don't see it happening. So what I would say is, right now, technology makes the agent's life that much easier. Instead of showing a customer 90 homes, you're now showing them 10, to get that final sale. So again, it's about how you integrate all of that into your practice. But people still really value, a good professional agent, and there always will be a need in my book for that.
And those are the ones that exceed, because it's more, right. It's about being professional, it's about being knowledgeable, and it's about being, focused on customer service. And I agree with you. Technology isn't going to give a client those things, and right. Support. So, I think I wanted to bring it up because I think if people are thinking it's a concern, I don't think so. And I agree with you. In our lifetime or lifetimes after ours, this is a people business. It always has been. It always will be.
Right.
The product is bricks and mortar, but it's really people that you deal with. So, I totally think that's a great answer. I want to get on to your career in terms of the highlights of your career and what you would say are the things in your career, real estate or otherwise, that you're most proud of.
I had to think about that one. First and foremost, I'd have to say that, still being in the industry 35 years later is one that I'm actually quite proud of. And I will say that, being a career management person in the industry, I think is something that, as you well know, we don't see as much focus anymore on that side of things. I was very privileged early on to be given an opportunity, as you mentioned in my bio, to manage in the corporate group of one of Canada's major real estate brokerages. So, while there wasn't a formal management training program, that's probably as close as it could get to one. And so I think, staying power in this industry, in many industries, but in particular in this one that is can be so intense and quite frankly, tough to hang in. I think that's probably one of the biggest things. And then probably it's having been able to maintain the kind of relationships, whether it's with people like yourself or, can still pick up the phone and talk to someone I met 30 years ago and in the industry and, still have a frank, friendly, professional discussion. And that's probably the most meaningful out of everything.
And I think you're right. I think there's a great deal of compliments to. I look at the same way. I know people that when I started are still in the business, and I think, wow, we survived just like you did. It's a tough business, and if you can survive 30 years, you really have figured it out. I mean, that's the real thing. If someone were to ask you now about becoming a real estate agent, given all the changes in technology and thing, how would you answer the question about, what do you need to be successful in real estate?
Well, it's, I don't think my answer's changed much from many, many, many years ago, which is, you need to be committed. And by that, I mean, you need to, think of it as a career, and you need to think of it as someone who's going to be a professional advisor to people on their most important purchase or sale. And what that means is that you have to dedicate the time and effort, energy, money, and really study and learn. So I don't think that that's changed. Unfortunately, with so much of the instruction, the course programs, so much of that going online, I think it's made it seem like it's not such a difficult career to get into. But as you and I know, probably the failure rate still hasn't changed from decades ago. It's still around 70% of the people within their first 3 years that just, realize that they can't make a go of it for different reasons, but, that's still the case.
And I think it comes down to people, and this is a great intro into what I've always felt. The consumer doesn't really understand what a real estate agent does because they meet them when, let's talk about the listing. They meet them when they do the listing and measure the house, and they probably meet them when there's an offer. So they think that's all they do. Right? Or if it's a buyer, show them a house, do an offer. But there's so much, to your point, training that goes into it, research that goes into it, that people, I believe, come into the business with you know what a doctor does, and you know what a lawyer does. And I don't think a lot of people really know what an agent does. And that may be the reason for that turnover. But it is what it is. I mean, it's always been that way, and I don't think it'll change. So I agree. In terms of your role as president and broker of record of a very large brokerage, what's been the most challenging part of that when you took over that role?
I think probably, the most challenging is, coming up with the right strategy, in terms of, keeping what already is a very successful business going forward and making it even more successful. And, part of that, the reason I say that strategy is challenging because, our earlier discussion about technology is probably the biggest challenge right now for the company in terms of figuring out, how to implement it in such a way that it helps the business, the agents, and ultimately keeps our shareholders, happy as far as the results. So I would say, strategy and where to focus our time and energy and money on ensuring that, we achieve some of the growth objectives that the board and have set out as, something that they want us to shoot for.
And of course, the other side of that coin of being the most challenging is what have you found to be the most satisfying part of running a very large brokerage?
Well, specifically in this case, and this credit to you and your other co-founders, of course, the late Arthur Bartram and of course Ron Petticord, who's still very much involved, is the fact that this company was built so well from the ground up in terms of its structure and in terms of, the focus on understanding, data, tracking metrics. I mean, everything really was so well, the foundation was so well built that, that has been probably, I would say the biggest blessing and the biggest help in terms of being able to, push ahead and do some of the things we're doing. And ultimately it is about the people and we're privileged to have a, wonderful team here that, are all very focused and dedicated on getting it done. But I would say going back to, the day you guys decided to start this business and started laying out the framework for how it was built is probably been, the biggest plus for someone like myself to be able to step in and carry it on.
Well, this goes back to when I was active in the company before I retired. And I would call John and I would say, John, of all the courses you've taken, I don't believe you took one on how to manage a large company in a pandemic. Okay. Like nobody had any history on something that hasn't happened for 100 years. But obviously the company survived and your leadership was, I think it was great to be able to figure out how to keep things rolling and keep them successful. So the question on that is, what was the greatest lessons that you learned from doing that and from keeping things going, and not falling apart?
Well, a pandemic or crisis or any sort of major event, quickly forces one to, sit down and have that conversation with your maker as to, oh boy, what do we do here? And so, I think the biggest lesson is having the right team around you that you can do that together, and as opposed to thinking that this is something that you have to do all by yourself. And again, I'm privileged to have the kind of board of directors that have some of certainly the smartest people I've ever had the privilege of working with. So, you're not in it alone. And we have the means and the ability to handle anything. So, I think the lesson is to, pause, take a step back, work with the team, and, the answers are there.
And because I've sat in that chair, more or less, I know how busy you are. So we try to keep the podcast to 30 minutes. So we hit 30 minutes. So I want to thank you for taking time to do this. And as I said earlier, talking to you is like talking to a friend. And I thought we did a great job, not overdoing it either way. And listen, I wish you continued good luck. I know we'll be talking off podcast as well. So thanks, John. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Howard. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Okay. We'd like to thank John Lusink, and we'd like to thank you for joining us today. And if you enjoyed our podcast, please like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast network or on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to reach us, you can reach us one of two ways: by email at info@rewithhd.com or on our website, rewithhd.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.